Changed for you all.
I'm counting. Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, we're making it. We have 7. Let's get rolling. All right. Well, welcome everyone. It is 10:02 and I'm gonna go ahead and get our monthly September meeting started. And it's nice to see everybody and welcome our esteemed guests. I'm really excited. I'm giving them the full floor for the entire meeting because there's just so many things in regards to this specific topic. But let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce our wonderful guest today, and I know you guys, I forwarded the press release in regards to that wonderful event that occurred. So hooray, congratulations on that. There are many more to go on that arrest, so that's great. This morning we've got Brooke Burris and also Lauren Knapp with the Tri-County Human Trafficking Task Force. And they're going to be presenting all about what the task force is, how we can help as a commission, next step in regards to how we can get trained high level, and also how we can disseminate that information to our other colleagues in our professional endeavor. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Who wants to go first? Take it away.
I'll let Brooke start first and go from there.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having us. We have a bit of a cold, but hopefully everybody can hear me fine. As Tricia said, I'm Brooke Burris and grew up here and am actually an attorney and have a legal background. So see this issue kind of first and foremost from a justice and kind of system oriented perspective. Really interested in structure of government, structure of public-private partnerships, and how that's working or not working for victims and prevention. I grew up here, so really have such a sense of love for this community, and we've just been, the issue's been so embraced by the Tri-County community, which we're so appreciative of, and this meeting's reflective of as well. Lauren, I don't know if you want to give a little bit background of yourself.
Yep. Also, my name is Lauren Knapp. Some of you may have recognized me. I was a city cop for a long time in the city of Charleston. And then I went over to the sheriff's office and worked for the sheriff for a while. So I come from a law enforcement background, but I switched over to the intelligence community back in 2012, 2013, one of the first intel officers on a criminal side in the area, and established several units here with regards to collecting information. At the root of this topic is reporting and finding unique ways to find reporting sources. I call them passive reporting sources because most victims of human trafficking do not self-identify. So if you're a law enforcement officer who encounters this, the likelihood of somebody running up to you saying, I'm trafficked is slim to none. So you have to use, intuitive skills to break down the trauma that they're dealing with in trying to get information and gain trust. But we also have to be more creative on the law enforcement side and the public safety side on finding ways to identify these victims of trafficking in other aspects of the community, be it a hospital setting, a detention center setting, any of those type of settings. So my background, I'm born and raised from Charleston as well. I went to DC for a little while into the Beltway. Don't hold that against me. I came home because I wanted to affect change at the local level. And that's where you get true reporting. So Brooke and I have been co-chairs since 2018. The former sheriff paired me up with Brooke when I was in the middle of a bunch of other things. And we've stuck together since. My purpose in staying on all of this is that I find myself as a female leader in Charleston now, much to my chagrin, because I was behind the scenes for 17 years of most of the major cases that came out of Charleston. So I was asked to be more front facing, and doing that with our task force. We have 9 subcommittees, and I'm looking to grow subject matter experts on this topic about our space. People want to know what's happening locally, and I want to build individuals in the respective subcommittees to be those authorities, so we can be dealing with facts and actually come to the root cause of what's happening and find solutions.
Yeah, so we have a bit of a presentation, and we'll go into some of the context of the task force, how it came about, which I could start off on, but thought we'd open it up to just hear your thoughts, because we have such a small, intimate group, which really is my favorite. Yeah, because we can actually have some discussion. So if anybody has a question, or something you want to make sure we address, or kind of specific aspect of the topic, we'd love to go ahead and hear that. Or we could go into the presentation if there's nothing right now. So no pressure.
Let me ask, has anybody seen the movie Sound of Freedom? Did anybody go see the movie Sound of Freedom? So we've got one hand raised. Okay. Well, I spoke last night, and probably 90% of the crowd raised their hand. If you haven't seen the movie has brought a big light to trafficking. I like to use Brooke's line that 2 things can be true. That is what trafficking looks like internationally. And trafficking does occur in that manner. Locally, however, trafficking looks a lot different. But we're very excited that it has brought this topic up to the level where people want to have the conversation. I actually had a gentleman last night at an event who pulled me aside after we spoke and said, "I thought this was all big conspiracy theory." So for you to bring it home locally has really opened my eyes, and I appreciate that. And I said that's a win right there. So only Trisha has seen Sound of Freedom. If you can go and see it, I would urge you to go and see it. There's a lot of different ways, if you're thinking about it, how you can unpack things. But at the end of the day, trafficking is an economic crime. And that is a great way to just paint it in that light. To get out of the criminal justice system. It's an economic crime. And I'll let Brooke kick it off, since only one person has seen the movie. Wow, I've gone from the other end of the spectrum after last night.
Hey,
Hi.
Brooke, before you start, there's 2 comments I would like to make.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because we had a presentation from the police department, oh God, maybe 5 years ago. When I first moved to Charleston, my next door neighbor, beautiful blonde with huge boobies, when she was 14 years old, her father sold her to a strip club, and her father received compensation all the years that she stripped until she was 38 years old. She hurt her back on a pole, and on her pole dancing, and she could no longer strip. Luckily, she didn't do drugs or alcohol, but she said definitely her father received money the entire time, and that continues that whole economic crime thing. And then just recently, so I want you to talk about it, because the police department had no idea where all the strip clubs were. And I just toured one because it's a property that's for sale. And the evidence of cocaine was everywhere. I don't understand why the police hadn't already busted it. But anyway, the second thing
Denise,
is
just what jurisdiction was the strip club you toured in?
it's on the peninsula.
Okay.
Okay. The other question I have is I flew last month, or maybe it was 2 months ago, came back to the airport, and I was early for my flight, and I was sitting in the alleyway or whatever that is. And I noticed a very strange behavior with a young girl and an older man. And clearly they were not connected, but they were connected. He was with her. And you know how my mother's instinct popped in, and I said, something's not right here. So I went to a TSA guard, and I said, I think we've got a trafficking situation here. And he said, we don't handle that. But then he took me to the policeman that was in charge of the airport. And I said, you need to check this out, because there's something strange going on with this young woman and this man. The police were totally, he didn't have procedures. He didn't know what to do. He didn't even take my name or number. And the next time when this happens, I will take a photograph. Now, I used to live in New York, and if you go to the train station, you can watch traffickers just picking girls right off the trains. when they leave, when they're exiting. So I've seen the weird behavior before. Shame on me for not taking a picture. And those are the two things. It's alive, it's well, and it's rampant everywhere. So I just look forward now to your presentation.
Thanks, Denise.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Thank you, Denise. And maybe I'll show you the law enforcement protocol card that we created. Yeah, okay. I won't go there right now. I'll do the presentation as you said, but really do appreciate those comments. All right. So as Lauren mentioned, I'll kind of start big picture and then get down into more local, what the actual like key issues are. And but being an attorney, I'm into context. Trisha, do you mind sharing this, letting me share the screen?
Oh, you should be able to. Let me make sure. I'm going to make you co-host. How about that?
Cool.
And then you should be able to share.
Okay. I think.
Did it pop up?
I think it's working. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So can everybody see this? It kind of helps me if I can see. So some of the kind of guiding themes of the first slide, some of the guiding themes around this are from the Department of Justice, from the federal level. In 2000, human trafficking became a crime nationally. So it's newer, and internationally it was also in 2000 that the UN came up with the Palermo Protocol, which was against the international protocol addressing trafficking in persons. So this really kind of started, this whole trafficking terminology began in the year 2000. And it didn't become a crime until 2012 in South Carolina, to give you a sense of the timeline. And then another timeline thing, this isn't on the slide, so just bear with me. 2000, national crime and kind of international. 2012, South Carolina on the books. 2015, federally, child abuse and neglect definition was expanded to include all forms of human trafficking. 2015. 2018, South Carolina expanded its definition, child abuse and neglect, to include human trafficking. And why that's important and gives kind of a sense of the timeline on how we as a country and state are addressing the issue and kind of where we're at on it, is because until human trafficking was on the books, the only commercial sex language that we had on our criminal code was about prostitution and solicitation, which fully includes consent. Prostitution, solicitation is all like, it's fundamentally consensual. Human trafficking is fundamentally non-consensual. So that really, like, the non-consensual forced commercial sex law was not really on the books. Rape was on there. That's not commercial though. Sexual assault's on there, not commercial. Domestic violence isn't commercial sex. So that's why the strip club's relevant in this regard. Of course, human trafficking includes both labor and sex trafficking. Anyway, kind of back to these guiding themes, but that's a bit of a timeline to let you know where we're at. So in 2000, when it became a federal crime, the Department of Justice and Department of State had a 3-piece framework to address trafficking, with prevention, prosecution, and protection. All of these things weren't really happening without a lot of collaboration and key partnerships. Therefore, in 2009, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton added partnerships to make it a 4-piece strategic framework. So this is from the federal level of how the framework is to address human trafficking. And kind of the other theme, so that's kind of one theme. The other one is that it's a global problem, but it's solved on the local level through this multidisciplinary response. Just as Lauren was mentioning, that the reporting happens on the local level, and trafficking isn't addressed without the true identification of, is this a victim? Without our airport having a protocol, and without you, Denise, saying something, trafficking isn't addressed. It just goes on the wayside because the nature of coercion, which I'll get into later, is that the traffickers are manipulating the victim to think that this is their decision and or their fault as to why they're in this situation. So these are some key themes. And because of this partnership collaboration piece, because it's solved on this local level, hence kind of why we have the task force. So there are 9 regional task forces around the state of South Carolina. Per legislation in 2012, the South Carolina Attorney General's Office hosts the statewide human trafficking task force. And then we're one of their affiliated with them via this regional task force that covers Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester. I don't know if you're familiar with the theory of collective impact, but it's kind of how we see the task force. The complex nature of most social problems belies the idea that any single organization can really address it. So you have this kind of backbone of in collective impact with this common agenda, shared measurement of what is success, and then the task force is kind of this backbone support. So we're really trying to bring everybody together to work toward this common agenda in a complementary manner. This is the structure of the task force. We have also recently included a refugee and foreign national subcommittee under partnerships right here. But you can see it's this 4-piece strategy from that federal level being implemented here locally with our task force. So we have subcommittee chairs for each of these subcommittees. And then we're serving a 2-year term that just began in July that will last till June of 2025. There's kind of a 6-month goal period, which we're in right now. So I'm really glad that we're making this connection right now. And then 18 months of the execution kind of phase.
Brooke, can you go back to that real quick?
Yes.
Just something I want to touch on with the subcommittees that we have. Obviously, we're very resource rich in Charleston. We actually don't know how fortunate we are from a social services perspective here in dealing with this topic. In other parts of the state, they don't have the resources. They're leveraging one group to do it all. So I think we're very fortunate in having this many groups. One of the challenges, just as a leader with these groups, is that everybody is very good within their own sandboxes and their own niche, but trying to open up those walls a little bit to get people to share information, because like Brooke said, to affect change on this, we're going to have to work together, and we get caught up sometimes in our own groups. Going to the law enforcement piece, we know locally we've had a lot of turnover for the first time in a long time in the Charleston area from a law enforcement perspective, from a leadership perspective, between all of the relative departments and sheriff's offices. So trying to keep that consistency has been very tough. I will say that I would never have thought 10 years ago that the law enforcement would be the hardest one from a leadership perspective, but it has been. And then in a lot of these cases begin and end with them. So that has been a big push with us for the last 2 years, and trying to get our other subcommittees to kind of prop them up with regards to, going after this task. But these cases take a long time. So I just wanted to touch on that based on what was said earlier. So.
Yes. And yep, we could go into that. There's, different thresholds, obviously, that law enforcement has to prove that victim service providers don't have to prove in court. And the fact that law enforcement is really down on officers is also a big challenge for us. We really feel that. And it just is debilitating all the more to victims' trust of the system. I'm going to switch slides because now this is pretty much the structure and kind of context of who the task force is. And we meet quarterly. I'll go to our website just so you can see. Yes, we meet quarterly in a public forum, and then we have every other month we have leadership meetings where the subcommittees are meeting together. This is the task force. If you'd like to get involved, you can just go here and go to connect. All those things. You can help support a victim by giving a gift card, and all those funds go directly to survivors. And now we'll get into a little bit about what is human trafficking. Unless anybody has any questions kind of about the task force. Great.
I do have,
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm so sorry, y'all, that I'm virtual. This is Councilwoman Parker. I'm
Yes, ma'am.
in the car. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
So I do have a question. So with your subcommittees, I mean, this might be a question for later as well. So just keep going. But what do those subcommittees do as far as, needing legislation, needing things put through? Does one of those subcommittees really focus on, hey, we need to get our local elected officials on this, or we need to get our state elected officials on this, et cetera, et cetera? Does that subcommittee sort of take the lead on that?
So Brooke and I have, so if you go onto the website, you'll see actually all the subcommittees worked in their own spaces on issues that they were dealing with. And they kind of had to rank the issues. What can they handle at their level? What needs to be handled at a more bureaucratic level from a process improvement or some type of a change? And they put together an executive summary and a report, Ms. Parker, that's on there. And then Brooke and I bring those together and kind of work through where we need to go. Brooke is a part of a legislative roundtable with several bills that they've been working on, and we're using those subcommittees in their various spaces to help inform these bills that you see in front of you right now. They each have their own issues. Obviously, the child advocacy centers are dealing with DSS issues, which is far removed from what law enforcement is dealing with regards to, penalties with crimes. So Brooke and I kind of channel all of this as one thing, and then I'll let Brooke talk about kind of the asks and how we take it to the next level with regards to the strategic plan of what we're doing from a task force perspective in alignment with the AG's office.
Yeah, so we started a legislative roundtable because obviously legislation is impacting the whole state. So it's kind of bigger than just the Tri-County, but very relevant to the local issues. So the legislative roundtable involves maybe 12 other nonprofits around the state and some other task forces so that we can speak with one voice. And we're currently working on 3 different bills. The website needs to be updated because this did just pass. We were one of 2 states without a cyber sexual harassment bill. I don't know if you know the story of Representative Duffy, but it is truly tragic. His son was essentially blackmailed by an international group after he the son sent some nudes of himself, and he did not know how to handle it and killed himself in the home. And for it to take those kind of stories to get legislation passed in our state is a big red flag. So we're working on the grassroots legislation, but kind of activities, but really are low on bandwidth for it. The device filter bill we're hoping to get out. Essentially, that's adding a default on devices where you're defaulting to having a filter on there to filter out adult content, so that a parent who maybe has a 12-year-old son, I have 2 boys, doesn't have to go through the steps of making sure that their parental controls are always up to date. This is a bill that's the model language is written by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE, and NCMEC, National Center on Missing and Exploited Children. So a few other states are working on this. I think it's mostly bipartisan in terms of its sponsorship, which is great. And the Commercial Sex Demand Reduction Act, this is addressing buyers. Our commercial sex code, prostitution, solicitation, procurement, has not been updated since 1986. So it's not even addressed human trafficking or the internet, which have both fundamentally changed the commercial sex industry. So currently our law on the books isn't even addressing it, accounting for those things. So this bill, I could go into it more, and I could actually send y'all a form that we're trying to garner some consensus and feedback from key partners. I'm talking a lot, but this bill separates prostitution from solicitation and procurement. Right now, they're under the same code. and it increases the penalties for solicitation and procurement, essentially saying that the parties are not equal. The person providing the commercial sex is oftentimes a very different, in a very different place than the person purchasing that. And then we have one more bill that's not on here, that's on the form that we also could go into in terms of legislation. But Councilwoman Parker, does that somewhat answer your question? I can put you on, we don't have a ton of bandwidth for the legislation, as I said, but on our e-blast, we'll be beginning to send more information out. If you sign up for the e-blast, you'll get some of that.
Okay, perfect. That definitely answers the question. And I just hope that you lean on, I know that, from a state level, obviously there's nothing that the city can do, but it's very impactful from the city's standpoint. We do it all the time for legislation up in Columbia, whether it's for tax dollars, whether it's for whatever the cause or issue may be, as we see, hate crime bill, things like that, we can send that message pretty loud and clear as a city. So don't forget to lean on our, these local offices, please, because these women issues, we have to, I think, locally really look and focus on these and make sure that we are being heard up in Columbia. So we can do that collectively. So yes, please send me all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. I will do that, and it'll be on the e-blast, but also I can send it to Trisha, and she can send it to the group as well. Kind of what is human trafficking? So some of the stereotypes are from the movie Taken, or that people are trapped, and really trafficking is, we hardly ever see this. We've not had a single case where someone's been in cargo ships over the port, or that's even really involved the port. We've not had a single case where someone's being, transported in a suitcase, or even there's nothing really like the movie Taken, where there's a lot of kidnapping involved. A lot of trafficking occurs. It is an economic crime, and a lot of it occurs through people that they know. So the traffickers, oftentimes, kind of a cost of business is taking the time to groom a victim to build up their trust, find out what vulnerabilities they have, what needs they have that aren't being met, so that they can begin to meet those to build trust, and then eventually begin pimping them out and forcing or manipulating them to provide sex acts. On the labor side, a lot of that is occurring by employers here, by employing a recruiter in Mexico or in Honduras, and where they're giving kind of a picture of a job that doesn't really exist here, but it sounds good. It's honorable. Oftentimes, like, you will pay you this much and you can send money back to your family. You'll make this kind of rate. When the person arrives to the US, the job's very different. They now owe a lot of rent. They owe a certain money for food, and they're making a lot less. Their communications oftentimes very limited. Oftentimes traffickers will take their documentation just to make them that much more vulnerable to what's going on.
One thing to note with the labor trafficking, you guys are the city of Charleston. Obviously, tourism is an industry here. We see a lot of that with regards to, I still get a lot of calls along with detectives. We have a lot of hotels in this town, and those hotels have to be cleaned. And a lot of people will go out and use contract services with people from outside of the country to clean those hotels, and they're legitimate. But there are some that we're so desperate for labor that they are not legitimate, and those things have to be investigated and looked at. We just had the recent case over in West Ashley with the individuals. It was their mom, but the kids were cleaning the movie theater at night. So I just wanted to kind of nail that home, just because we're on the city of Charleston, and that's a common call we get with regards to a lot of the hotels and that side of the business. We always think construction and some other things, and it happens there, but just to kind of make it more localized, the hotels are a big issue. I work with a lot of the big resorts around here and get phone calls a lot from their heads of security when a new contract shows up. And they're questioning what we know, how did we get to this point? Are we sure this is legitimate? And they're doing their due diligence. A lot of them are doing their due diligence. So I just wanted to put that on the call.
I just want to add one thing to the comment on the hotels. 2012, I was hiring a group of people, and a number of them had come out of Florida. These were managers, though. These were experienced hotel and food service managers. And in doing the research, I found that the hotels, this was a major resort, was working with the cruise lines, and they were bringing in people on the cruise ship. And that's how they snuck them in.
Right.
And
So there's always, it's economics at the end of the day. I'm
that's
very happy that a lot of the hotels, the bigger resorts around here have actually reached out to the task force, and we train their staff almost yearly on what to look at. So they're almost, it's like self-policing themselves.
good.
If anyone wants to see like the actual language of the federal law, this is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. It again includes both labor and sex trafficking. Some people will hear the term organ trafficking. That's only in the human trafficking realm internationally under the Palermo Protocol. In the US and in our state law, human trafficking includes just labor and sex. A lot of big organizations will use the AMP model, act means purpose model, to really kind of display that federal law language. So you have an act by a trafficker, you can recruit. So thinking of recruiting, not kidnapping necessarily. None of these words are kidnapping. These are the acts by the trafficker by these means, force, fraud, and coercion, which we'll get into the meanings of those, for a commercial sex act or forced labor. And this is in red because there's a big kind of highlight here that if there's a minor, so someone 17 and under, this element is obsolete. You just need a recruiting or transferring or harboring someone for commercial sex. This is a big deal and can look almost unintuitive in real life. So this could mean that a 16-year-old could post a picture of themselves, meet someone for a date, provide a sex act, get paid, go shopping with the money. It all seems consensual. It all seems like both parties got kind of what they wanted, but under the law, age of consent has nothing to do with trafficking. Age of consent in South Carolina is 16. That's consenting to consensual sex. This is, again, commercial sex. So this piece, that economic crime piece that Denise and Lauren keep bringing up, is so crucial to this. And really explains a lot of the vulnerabilities as well, and incentive structure around the whole issue. But so this 16-year-old, under the law, we do not think that a minor can consent to a commercial sex act. So they're not responsible for that kind of consenting until they're 18, and that's when it can become prostitution. So if an 18-year-old provides a sex act, gets the money, that's prostitution now. So that's kind of what trafficking is. Force is pretty obvious in terms of its element. It includes physical restraint. This is like some of the kidnapping pictures. This is what these are getting at. The element we see most in trafficking cases are fraud and coercion, because these two elements, fraud and coercion, are what make the victim believe I'm a part of this, or this was my fault. So they're not necessarily trying to run away, or they're not thinking that when they have a service provider or law enforcement coming to identify them, that they're saved automatically. they think I'm a criminal, or they think I've got myself into a big mess and I don't trust that you can help me. Or I'm in a big mess and my trafficker is my best friend and the only person that's cared about me in my whole life. Excuse me. We had a case with a 15-year-old in DSS custody who was being trafficked by her mom. And from 15 to 17, she was in and out of DSS. Law enforcement was trying to investigate, but low bandwidth. I went to go meet with her just to kind of tell her rights, no matter who the trafficker is, like, you are entitled to these rights under the law. And she didn't want to hear it because it was her mom. She had no other person in the world could be her mom. And I couldn't say in good faith that we had the kind of services to provide adequate housing and emotional support for you at that time. So those are kind of the like very complex dynamics. And she aged out of the system, like complete system failure in every regard, on the services side, on the mental health side, on the legal side, and on the criminal side of things. And yet it's really complex. I can understand why she would want to go back. The mom was selling her to the landlord to make rent. So fraud, this goes back to, I kind of went to coercion there, but fraud goes back to these like false promises of employment, a false job. Of course, the internet has exacerbated this in every way. I got a call from Berkeley County School District a few years ago about two 18-year-olds, but students that were going to be flown up to New York for a modeling job. And the website for the modeling job looked extremely questionable. So that can be easy to kind of dupe someone into thinking that there's a really great opportunity, like employment opportunity. Coercion is in almost every case that we see. It includes threats of serious harm, which can be very personal. So if in a culture, someone really cares about their reputation and there's a threat that they'll post some picture, like that can still be counted as serious harm under the law, and makes the fact finding of the case all the more important. And the trafficker, it kind of explains why they're getting to know their victim all the more, because they can manipulate in every kind of from every angle that they can. This also includes abuse of the law under coercion. So when a trafficker's telling a victim that actually they're a prostitute, and that's abusing the law. Actually, they're a victim, but that trafficker's using the law against them to make them think that they're a criminal and they have no option or did this to themselves. When employers are taking documents and saying that your visa's run out and I'm making a generous gesture to you to keep you on, even though you're illegally here now, like that's abuse of the law. No, actually, I still have rights. You've been victimizing me and limiting my communication this entire time we've been employed. So that's kind of bringing a picture to how coercion is used.
And Brooke, I'll stop you right there real quick. So from a fact-finding mission, as she explains all of this, it's very complex. So from the law enforcement perspective, you see it takes a lot of time to unpack all of this while they're working other cases. So these cases, they take a very long time. And the one thing that Brooke has said over and over again is that the victim has to kind of realize what's happening, because from a law enforcement perspective, to investigate it and get the facts, to get a case, to actually go after them, you have to have the victim's buy-in. And a lot of times you're not going to get that right off the rip. So that unpacking and the very complex nature of this is something that law enforcement has really never seen when it comes to dealing with trauma and trying to unpack that trauma, and then hopefully getting a victim to realize that they are indeed a victim and work with the officers to bring these cases to fruition.
Yes. And so going into labor trafficking, a lot of times it can start in the other country, the home country of the victim. I mean, a whole other challenge for law enforcement. Oftentimes, as I said before, the employers will almost hire or partner with recruiters in other countries. The recruiter will say, I have this great job for you in the US, but it's going to cost you $6,000 to get there. It's fine because you can pay that off to me when you start the job. I'll take it after. So now you're going over there, over to the US, you're starting the job, you're making half of what you thought, and you're basically in debt. So first off, you're paying off this debt. Maybe the interest all of a sudden goes up, and you have a very limited support system. We have key partners with the South Carolina Legal Services Migrant Farm Worker Unit who have to be so proactive with the migrant labor camps to just even tell people that there are rights, that you have rights. So that's a key part. That's kind of debt bondage. The involuntary servitude and forced labor are very similar. We're essentially having those key elements of force, fraud, and coercion. This is a really neat, a really descriptive kind of spectrum of what's the difference between like wage theft and at what point has the threshold of the situation met labor trafficking. Less pay than promised, under minimum wage, denial of pay. This is all kind of exploitation and maybe a violation of other employment laws. But when you get into these more personal issues of, and kind of dangerous issues of threats of violence, intimidation and control, deception of consequences, like that visa case. Now these are elements that are on the side of rising to the level of trafficking.
I just want to add one thing to what you talked about. I met a senior manager from one of the resorts. They had 3 managers that were overseeing their payroll system, ADP. And ADP was what the managers were doing with their override on a weekly basis was taking a percentage off of the employees that were new Americans off of their paychecks because they felt that the new Americans would be afraid to report them. The manager did report this and he was terminated. So you need to, one of the questions you need to ask, who can override the payroll information? Because it's all automated. But if multiple managers, that's how they skim money off of their employees.
That's a great point, Denise.
That's a great point, Denise. That was a hotel here.
Yes, that was a resort here in South Carolina, actually here in Charleston. And when it gets to, I have a lot of experience in restaurants. And but you have to watch where, if they can override and they can intimidate you, which it sounds like that's what they're doing all the time, that's how they cut into your paycheck. Or you have to provide services to the managers for them to schedule you. That's another thing I've seen.
Yeah, that is a great point. The scenario we were going to talk about was in a restaurant of an owner taking advantage of someone who was mentally disabled. And he was not, that employee was living in the restaurant, had worked there for years, over 25 years. And that this occurred in Myrtle Beach. So that's kind of on the labor side. There's 3 different types: debt bondage, involuntary servitude, and forced labor. On the commercial sex side, anything of value is given, promised, or received in exchange for the sex act. This is what we're going into the commercial realm. These are kind of common types: pimp, game, familial, survival sex even. And anything of value is not just money. So you could do a sex act and someone's providing you a stay for a night or shelter. They're providing you food, gang affiliation, kind of community there. So drugs, clothes. So it can be anything of value, not just money. And this value component, which I feel like we've brought home, explains some of the incentive structure and some of the vulnerabilities of who is targeted. That's why those struggling with homeless oftentimes are like in and out of prostitution or in and out of human trafficking. Those in poverty, because they are vulnerable in that economic manner and can be taken advantage of there. And this commercial piece, as I've already said, is what makes trafficking distinct from rape and a lot of other sex crimes. Who benefits? The trafficker will oftentimes keep most of the money, whether that's the employer or the pimp or gang member or family member. So that's oftentimes the driver there. The trafficker may or may not be part of a larger organized crime. Trafficking, as Lauren's kind of pointed out, can look very different. It can be one person with 3 victims, and they're all kind of a business. Or it could be this, some of a whole international scheme where there are employers working with different recruiters internationally, and that there may be even transporting victims around the state. So that makes it all the harder for law enforcement to really pin down what's going on, because then the information sharing between jurisdictions is a whole other challenge.
There's also the white collar piece to a lot of this is at the end of the day that there's the crime of trafficking, but there's also corridor, there's corridors to enter into investigations, maybe through a tax, situation. Maybe they're not filing federal taxes. So they have to be really creative when it comes to looking at these cases, because they might not have the victim involved at this point. So they've got to look at the totality of everything. So very strategic thinking as it relates to the overall case. And that might be one piece of a bigger picture. And let's face it, the ramifications of the white collar crime might be more punitive than the actual trafficking piece. But if we can get the survivor identified and out of the lifestyle, that's a victory. And that, what does justice look like is something we have to say a lot to a lot of our subcommittee chairs. Is justice looks different for everyone. Justice looks different for every survivor. Some survivors just want to have a roof over their head and their driver's license back, and maybe their children. Some want to see the bad guy put away for hundreds of years. So everybody kind of has to be on the same page of what justice looks like, especially when you're working these very, very collaborative and complex cases.
And I just question.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Denise.
You mentioned that 16 is the age for consensual sex. And I'm just throwing this out to the group. Should it be raised to 18? I wanted to know, what is the age that you can marry in South Carolina? Because I know Florida was at 10. They just raised theirs. Do we know what the age? Because there's also arranged marriages that are also part of human trafficking. And I don't know what the age is down here.
Isn't it 14, right,
I believe it's 14.
Okay, well, that's also something else we might want to change. And the woman in Florida that got it changed, she was married off at 10 and then provided work services for her husband until she got herself out of it at 18. And then she worked for 10 years to change the law. So we might want to—
I stand corrected. It's going to be 16, but you have to have consent of a parent, relative, or guardian.
Okay,
So
but remember, if I'm going to give the parent, relative, or guardian money, that's how I get consent, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Right.
that's the money trail. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And just to piggyback a little bit, I know, just time check, we've got it's 50 after, but just one comment too. The Charleston has just an influx of the velocity and growth in a state also perpetuates the entanglement, so to speak, and the cobweb of how different data points access this umbrella of human trafficking. When I lived in Texas, in Dallas and in North Texas, being the corridor from the southern border all the way to New York, it's basically a nice little hub and spoke wheel for bringing in minors, everybody just under the umbrella you can actually think of. Trafficking human beings, period, is really easily accessible. Now that Charleston, South Carolina, as a whole is growing, it's really behooves us as citizens to be more aware. I know we're aware of traffic, literal cars on the road, and foot traffic downtown, but all these people in a condensed space also heightens our ability to be a little bit more conscious of our surroundings. So I just wanted to say that as something to really think about collectively. It's not, if you think it's not a problem here, it certainly is. And we can all contribute to providing some justice to our victims. So anyway, that was my shameless plug.
That's a good leeway, Tricia, because I was actually going to tee Brooke up about talking about some recent local cases and what they look like here in the last 2 years coming out of COVID. And maybe she can talk a little bit more about the different of individuals and what it looks like in Charleston and the Tri-County.
Yes, on the minor side, a lot of the victims are first approached or speaking, building a relationship with their trafficker through social media and through different apps. So I would just say for any parents here to be very proactive on how your children are interfacing with their phones and their friends' phones. The Bark phone and the GABB phone both have parental controls embedded in the device. So it's just an easy kind of to do. The iPhone parental controls are flaky. When the iPhone updates, it can delete all parental controls you had inputted before. Anyway, so social media is a huge part of this. With the building of a relationship and the grooming piece that can happen at the kitchen table or in your son or daughter's bedroom upstairs. So that's just been a huge landscape change. For some of the cases that we're seeing, we saw a labor trafficking case a few months ago where a mother was trafficking her children to a movie theater, through a movie theater, essentially, where they were working nights and cleaning the theater, and she was getting all of the money. They had a high truancy issues at the school, but because they were foreign national students, the school wasn't holding them to kind of the same standard of truancy rules that they were for some of the domestic students, which is I just say that because it's very interesting. I had not really thought of that, but truancy can be a key indicator of human trafficking. A lot of the sex work too, if this was a sex case, can happen in the evening, or someone's sleeping during class. Like those can be small indicators. To just ask more questions, not even necessarily that it's human trafficking, but hey, are you safe at home? How are you spending your time? Things of that nature. Oh, I see you have these new shoes. Where'd you get those? I worked with a victim in San Diego who was 15, who her boyfriend was trafficking her, also on drugs. He got put in jail and told her how much she needed to make to bond him out, which she did by driving Ubers after she got home to a hotel. The buyers would Uber her to their hotel and she would be back in the evening to eat dinner with her family. Like that's how within those kind of 3 hours it was occurring. You would never think she was a victim, just that she made a bad decision with a boyfriend who was dealing with having drug issues. 60-year-old male buyers were doing this to her, 60, and she's 15 and looked 15. So a lot of the victims here, we are identifying through screening tools that we proactively work to implement. So kind of as strategy, identifying key agency stakeholders, asking them what their screening and referral process is for human trafficking is a key question and could change the landscape of our ability to identify the nature and prevalence of trafficking if we had enough bandwidth and just like sole focus to just do that. On the back end, we don't have enough resources for all the identification. But when we were starting the task force in 2018, we asked the sheriff's office, Charleston County Sheriff, what their stats were on prostitution and human trafficking victims. They had about 180 prostitution arrests, but about 7 victims identified. With that kind of huge discrepancy of data, we worked with the detention center to input a screening tool to help identify victims, and just across the board identification, which is nice about a screening tool. It's not necessarily dependent on personnel remembering indicators from a training. What was funny though is that Sheriff Cannon at the time said, we don't have enough bandwidth to have any sort of adequate response when the victim's identified. So task force, what is going to be your resource response? We had no entity in the Tri-County serving adult victims. So this led to us creating a nonprofit to host those advocates who are then going to the jail. They're going almost 4 times a week to the jail to interview potential victims. And we're getting the most of our adult referrals from the county jail who were not being identified before. So that's a little bit of a picture to show how proactive you have to be with identification and the referral piece. They really do go together. And to say how much building we're kind of needing to do to address this. Again, why I'm so thankful just to have this time with y'all. But a lot of those victims are booked into the jail because of drug charges or petty crimes like petty larceny, things of that nature that are very much tied to their trafficking. Or we had a story the other day of 33-year-old, I believe, and she was trafficked by her dad since she was 9. And it had never been, human trafficking had never come across her purview as maybe that's what's happened to me. So that's what's so tragic about this, that the victimization's occurring for years and we're so late on the pickup. There's so much trauma there to help that person on a healing journey. But
We're also getting a lot of males, Brooke. When I say we're getting a lot of males as well.
Yeah.
We talk about females, but the screening tool in the jail is actually finding males. We had about 3 or 4 in a month period. We were like, what is happening? Which is, we have researchers attached to our task force. They found it amazing and intriguing. My lights just cut off.
Yeah.
If I could just add, I ran a relatively large company for 33 years. So I had over 2,000 employees. Fathers tend to throw their sons out at 12. And that's when you start seeing they're either going to throw their sons out of the house or they're going to start trafficking them at 12 and making money off of them. Now down here in South Carolina, and I don't know if you guys have found a correlation, we have a high, it's just not South Carolina, it's everywhere. High percentage of incest, girls 9 to 13 being raped by either dad, grandpa, or mom's boyfriend. That's a big number. Those girls can't go back home after they have that baby. And I don't know what happens to them after that. So to me, now Florence Crittenden, that's their sweet spot, but that's something, we need to look at. And then 14 is when they start getting, 13, 14, they get picked up and wined and dined for a year and then put to work. So that's what, again, I come from Ohio, which also has a high incest problem. But I'm curious if you're running into, those girls that have gone through incest and that trauma, they can't go home. And what are they doing? Who's picking them up after that?
Hey, all, this is Leslie. I need to drop for another meeting, but I thank you for taking the time to present today. And I've done some work with a similar collaborative in Ohio, so this is great to hear it. I think in terms of next steps, I'd love to propose potentially getting some ideas from you all on how this commission could most be effective, knowing that you all are the experts on this. If there's a unique way that this commission can use its voice to help further your mission, and if you all have some concrete steps or actions that we could consider, I think that would be great to make this action oriented.
Yeah, Leslie, I agree with you. Well, Trisha, we'll talk with Trisha and try to come up with some things. There's so many different avenues we can go down. And so, yeah, we'll make sure we get that. And then Brooke just put some things in the chat box with regards to the legislative piece, getting people involved in that is huge as well. Just so everybody's spread out across the entire state.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Great.
Thank
you
you.
all.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Leslie. It is 11:01 and we've got a couple minutes if you want to close out, Brooke, and lead with,
Question.
you know, there's a lot to unpack, and I am very grateful that you guys were able to make it. So, any questions, ladies? I know it's a lot of information.
Trisha,
Go
I
ahead,
had a
Mindy.
question. I was curious if you all have been able to connect with the school districts and do any trainings of parent advocates. You know, as you mentioned, you know, they're going to see a lot of the absenteeism. So has that been able to happen in any of the school districts?
We haven't really prioritized that since COVID until just these past few weeks. We just launched Monday a club, Youth Education and Advocacy Against Human Trafficking Club at Academic Magnet. And what that took was a student and a mom being super proactive. We had worked with them in 2019 to start a club there, which started and then just kind of dropped, you know, in 2020. But the schools are mandated. It's in the South Carolina Comprehensive Health Education Act to teach on human trafficking, but it's like 3 bullets of what the standards are. So that's why these clubs was really going to, you know, the concept and hope is that it gives a faith and actual like peer kind of space for reporting and prevention efforts as well. The Attorney General's office just launched a whole traffic proof SC campaign, and I'll put the website in the chat box. But with the schools, it's hard for them to choose a curriculum that they can actually execute on. So it became really complex really fast. A lot of the curriculum are really long. And again, when you just have those 3 bullets of standards, like what's human trafficking, provide some resources that are local. What are your rights if you're a victim? It's a big lift on the schools to ask them to do a curriculum that includes 5 classes. So, but hopefully the Attorney General's office is taking that on with their traffic proof SC curriculum work. So I think that they're coming out with a curriculum. It's in the works still a little bit. So I'm a little fuzzy on it.
It's in its beta phase, and they're talking at the state level, obviously, from an implementation perspective. So,
but Mindy, we would like to start more clubs if you have a contact. I've presented different curriculum at the Charleston County School Board, and it got into the weeds really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we do have some youth
you know,
programmings in our office. And so we have the Mayor's Youth Commission and then Youth Volunteer Corps, both of which are youth focused. Youth Volunteer Corps is all about volunteerism and volunteer projects. And then the Mayor's Youth Commission comes up with the issues that youth are facing. And so, for example, mental health is real high on the list. But I actually was more thinking about doing something with the staff at school so that they could maybe help with identifying victims.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the parent advocates at the schools, they will know what child hasn't been in school for a week quicker than maybe some other folks might be. So if there was a way to provide information directly to school-based staff, I was just wondering if they might be able to be part of the identification of victims.
yeah,
I
definitely
was
on
going
the
to say,
front line.
Brooke, I work with the 3 women that run the homeless project for the Charleston County School District. And I mean, right now they're dealing with 250 student families that are homeless and 173 Gadsden Green families that are homeless. But right after this call, because I just asked them if they track truancy, but I think they would be a good group. They're wonderful women to hook you up with to see how you could also, and I was going to suggest and even if nobody else wants to do this, I would love to meet with you guys and maybe do like a 2-3 hour strategic planning. I was chair of our educational foundation for the National Restaurant Association 2013. We started that program in 1996 with one high school in Illinois. And then we went to 4 high schools in California, and now we're in 4,000 high schools. So that model of how they rolled that out and got funding and all that might be a perfect model. And maybe we could even attach to their model, because they're working with 15 and 16-year-olds in most of the schools and all of the military bases. So that might be, so I'm happy to sit with you guys and share and put you in contact with people, that because this is just such a tragedy.
It is. That's a great point. And I've been taking notes feverishly. It is 11:07, a little over time, but this is well worth it. I do have, just to closing out, a couple of items. I will make sure to share out the links that were shared in the chat section, and also some, just some ponders of the 8 subcategories that you guys have, the subcommittees. So open it up to our committee and our commission to actually go through it and determine what speaks to their heart, that they can easily and relatively less effort make some quick wins that we could put on the board. And then also, when is your next meeting so we can attend?
Yes, the next meeting is November 10th, I believe. Give me 1 second and let me confirm that.
Sorry, I should have given you prep on that.
No.
We're both like,
Going back and forth. It's November 3rd,
Okay.
from 10 to 11:30. And we are kind of switching between the 3 counties, and I think it's Berkeley's
Charleston.
turn.
No,
Charleston.
it's Charleston, I think.
Oh, it was Berkeley last. You're right. It's Charleston's turn.
Charleston, yeah.
All right. Back. No
Um,
excuses, commission.
Yes, please attend, and all the subcommittees will be that much more.
The
closer
subcommittee
in the
chairs
plan.
will all be there, so you can connect with the subcommittee that speaks to your heart and those chairs and what they're working on and how you can help them, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
Hey, Tricia,
one last. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Tricia. I can't raise my hand. I know I'm not on video.
No worries.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing all of this. I think my eyes are wide open. And I just, please let us know what you need from us, what we can do to help. I think you said there was a program you have that shares gift cards and things with victims. And you also have advocates. So if you can share those resources, and I will definitely plan on attending the meeting. But just thank you, and thank you for keep wearing your shirts to River Dogs games. Okay.
So good.
So good.
Thank
All
you.
right. And then we have one question in the chat as well. Miss Carolyn wanted to know the involvement with faith-based organizations.
Yes, we are it could go a few different ways. Clergy is a looser term, and they are mandated reporters. So any help with training any churches would be impeccable. On the side for services, a lot of victims are needing transportation help. We've been looking for churches to partner in that regard. And then we are just launching on Friday, soft launch is Friday, a fairy godparent program with D. Norton, where a faith-based subcommittee person will be connected with a victim through the D. Norton liaison. So, which really kind of alleviates a lot of confidentiality issues, but it'll be a person to victim connect. If you would like to come Friday, we're meeting at D. Norton at noon, and we have space for about 2 more people. But no pressure either. So there will be lots of other opportunities.
I have a funeral on Friday, but otherwise. I
Oh,
was-
gosh.
And I just want to mention that in the AME churches, we have persons who are social action. So this would be something that we could present.
Oh, wow.
I'm a licensed certified social worker myself, so I hear that at my church. So,
Okay.
but I'm very interested. I worked in New York for about 40 years before coming back home. So a lot of this
Wow.
is near and dear and, close. But I
Thank you
look
so
forward
much.
to the November 10th meeting also, Tricia.
Third. And
yeah.
I'll put it all in the notes for everybody, I promise. Notes, links, meetings, subcommittees, and maybe we need to find the next screening or showing of the movie so we can be prepared for the meeting. All right. Anyhow, closing out, just wanted to say thank you, everyone. I know we're over and I really, truly treasure your time. Thank you so much for presenting. I know this is just invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And now that you've got the attention of a dozen members on this commission, we will multiply that in spades. Okay, so thank you so much. Sound of Freedom
Thank
is
you.
the movie, and
Yep.
I will put that all in the notes as well. Thank you again, and you guys have a wonderful afternoon and great week ahead. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank
Be
you, ladies.
safe.
Appreciate it.
Thanks all so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Very welcome.
Councilwoman.
Yes, thank y'all.
I'm gonna wait till she gets off mute, and I'm sure she's
Bye,
saying you're
thank you
welcome.
all. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all so
Thank you.
much.
Yes, ma'am.
All
All
right.
right, take care, everyone.